Welcome back to The Rebel's Edge. I am John Najarian, and today we talk about how the Middle East heating up has one commodity in particular also heating up on The Rebel's Edge. Bang! Welcome to The Rebel's Edge. He is my brother Pete, who I pretend to be whenever I'm doing something bad.
Great.
People come up to me and say, "Hey Pete, good to see you." Last night, Pete, I was at a restaurant here in Chicago. Guy came up to me and said, "Hey, I recognize you from CNBC and Fox." And I said, "Thank you very much." And he said, "So Pete, what are you doing in Chicago?" And I said, "Well, pretty much whatever I want, because I own this town. I'm Pete Najarian." And he kind of walked away. God, what a prick.
Great. By the way, this is my best, Phantom of the Opera that I can do. I've got this light coming from here. I got nothing over there. I've got the whole thing, John. So, excuse my the video for sure today, but stuff happens, man. Just 20 minutes ago, I had a guy back there behind me with a concrete mixer flying around. So at least this gives me a chance to be able to speak and be heard rather than I'll sacrifice that versus the video side of it not being very, very solid today.
All right. Well, folks, on the Rebel's Edge, we talk macro for 1 minute. And that's what we're about to do right now. Macro, I'm going to say Mideast tensions, Pete. Sharp gains in crude oil prices. Israel has yet to launch its promised retaliation, and depending how big that retaliation is, it could spark a bigger conflict, of course. We all worry about that. And who worries about it the most that we can track? Well, crude oil traders, because crude is up better than 4.5% today, Pete.
Yeah, it's an amazing move by crude, John, and not shocking. We know what's going on. We know the Middle East has been this unbelievable area that could at any moment in time, cascade into something very bad. So people are concerned for sure. I think those tensions are real. I think the volatility is a reflection of that. And when we look at this, obviously all you've got to do is look at the price of crude. That move, John, from 67 all the way up to 73 in not too many trading days. That's an incredible move.
Yeah, it is. And it's one of those things, Pete, when you see a move like that happening, you know that there's a catalyst. Pete and I just talked about the catalyst, and that catalyst hasn't gone away. It's not one and done. It's like, okay, now we're still worried because Israel could still make a bigger move than any of us thought, which could disrupt the transportation of crude and all that kind of stuff. All right, Pete, fantastic futures for me today. I could go with crude oil, which is popping through 73 right now. I was talking with the good folks at Investors Business Daily yesterday about that, because that's it popped to 73 yesterday, pulled all the way back down to 70, closed at 71. Today it's pushing up towards 74, and that's one of the things I'd talk about. The other, Pete, is interest rates. Interest rates are still higher than when the Fed cut. The 10-year is back to 3.82.
Yeah.
So you might recall it was down around 3.6, I think, when they cut, Pete. So why are interest rates from the bond side of the world going like this, Pete, on the yield side, when the Fed is saying, hey, we're going to be in a cutting cycle? People don't believe it is why.
Yeah, that's it. It's interesting for sure, and I was taking note of that as well, John. And by the way, speaking of taking note, you're talking about crude. I'll even jump over a little bit. How about nat gas? It's at the highest levels it's been. If you have to go all the way back to June when we were pushing right around $3, that's about where we are right now. So it's a big jump there as well. Volatility, I mentioned it already, but I'm going to get a little bit deeper with that one. It's the highest level that it's been over the last 2 weeks. It's gone from 15 to 20 plus. And here we are sitting there right around that 20 plus area. And, oh, by the way, 50 Cent, as he's known, he or she, the trader, is out there once again, John, with some massive trades. As a matter of fact, the October 27-29, it's a $2 call spread, is going for 12 cents. And it went 165 times. It's 165 1,000 times. So that's a big trade. That's something that very much looks like the footprint of somebody that we refer to all the time as 50 Cent. And that wasn't what they didn't stop right there, John. They also bought the October 35, October 40. It's a $5 call spread. That was going for 28 cents or 21 cents. Very
21.
Inexpensive, but looking for that big move in volatility, whether it's, a little bit closer or really starts to explode. And let's not forget, they were going for the 65 calls not too terribly long ago as well. So we are seeing a lot of folks that are playing that volatility side, or at least one. That's 50 Cent.
Yeah. And when 50 Cent makes a trade like that, folks, it doesn't always happen that the timing on that trade is critical. That, in other words, is something going to happen today? Maybe. But, look, they bought the October options in both those cases that Pete talked about. And they bought a ton of those calls, which generally, when things become more uncertain, that's where the direction of the VIX is, up. Yep. And 165,000 is 16.5 million share equivalent in that index.
Big trade.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Mm-hmm. All right, Pete, let's talk about Levi Strauss. I know yesterday you were talking about Cal football. Well, turns out that Levi Strauss and some of his progeny went to and matriculated from the University of California at Berkeley, as did Haas. It's named for the business school, of course, with these avocados, the Haas avocados. But anyway, Pete, Levi Strauss not seeing the good results that people thought that they should. The net revenue, $1.52 billion, it missed on revenue, it missed on bottom line, and in after hours trading, we saw a significant drop last night, and it's not really seeing a big recovery today.
No, and John, it's interesting though. They missed on the revenue, but this is the other side of it. You could flip it a little bit more positive and say, but it was still up year over year, and that's something that you and I talk about a lot. Is what does it look like in the really big picture? I mean, the front quarter, that's one thing, but the big picture. So that would be one positive, I think, if you were interested in this stock, that you could, kind of hold on to. But there is some guidance problems, and you and I talk about this all the time. But you can have great earnings, great revenue, great everything, but that guidance is always a real key. And I think that's the part that I think has got people pretty disappointed right now. They are looking, at least they're talking about Dockers, and what do they want to do with that, right? And they've already hired Bank of America to represent them. And I talk about those financials, John, the ones that are involved in investment banking. That's where it's critical, I think. Those are the ones that really have the best opportunity to continue the run that we've seen out of some of the financials this year. Bank of America would be one of those. What are they going to do? Are they going to try to spin it off, sell it? That might be a possibility. That's certainly something that would be on the table. And I think that might be beneficial for them at Levi, because they're having some struggles on different brands and what the sales look like. And this is something right now that they're obviously having to navigate through this. They are sitting smack dab in the middle of the 52-week low and the 52-week high. So I think this is one where you want to keep a very close eye on it, and what might exactly happen with Bank of America, and are they shopping this or are they not? That'll be an interesting question.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll look for action in the options that might tip us off as to that direction. Mm-hmm. All right, Constellation Brands, Pete, STZ. This, of course, is one of Diageo's biggest competitors. They own a whole bunch of brands from, let me see, Pete, Miomi. They also own Svedka vodka and a whole bunch of spirits, let's call it. Second quarter revenue, they surpassed analyst expectations on the EPS, but the revenue side was only slightly better. And for that reason, as soon as the earnings came out, up and down, and it's trading near the lows of the day right now.
Last I looked, though, John, it wasn't getting beat up, really, right? It's down a couple of percent. And I think a lot of that is very interesting. I think that reaction's interesting. And I think part of it is they reaffirmed their 2025 guidance, their outlook. And I think that was important. They needed to do that. Obviously, they did beat on the earnings, but you talk about that revenue and so forth. The biggest concern that I see right now, John, is the wine and spirits part of this whole thing and the losses that they're taking there. That, I think, is what people are kind of looking at. But quite honestly, I don't think they're overly concerned at this point in time. And like we said, down maybe about 2%. Last I looked, it was trading about 250. 52-week high is 275. They're not that far off. So I think this is one that you'd want to keep an eye on this one as well. I don't think you have to jump on it. I don't expect it to suddenly make a spike, but they're going to have to deal with some of the issues that they're having. Beer sales are okay. Wine and spirits, not so much.
Yeah, well, it's another sign, Pete. And again, I'm not trying to talk down the economy, but there's a reason that so much evidence has shown up from ConAgra yesterday, FedEx before that, all the dollar stores and so forth. There's a lot of signs out there that the consumer is pretty much seeing as much as they can of their use of credit. And I think this is another sign that people, even though they gave the guidance, as you say, Pete, that it's not exactly robust out there as people might have you believe. All right, let's talk about Rezolve AI. These guys getting a deal with Microsoft to drive retail innovation with their AI-powered commerce solutions. The stock is seeing a pretty big day, Pete. Normal turnover is about 260,000 shares. It's over 4.2 million in the first couple hours of trading today. So definitely a very big move for RZLV right now.
And Bain out there is basically giving a big salute, saying this looks outstanding. And they're talking about this being a $1 trillion company, John. So this is something that gets pretty damn interesting pretty fast. They pushed it out to 2027, but you look at where it is right now, and certainly they are in a sweet spot, I think. And it's something that makes a heck of a lot of sense. This partnership that they've got going on with Microsoft, really big. It's trading about $9 right now. Is up what? 31%, John, I think is the number. And if they can jump the way is projected right now by Bain, this is a stock that probably needs to be watched really carefully and look for those options out there when folks are starting to nibble a little bit maybe at this one, because I think it looks pretty impressive. This is going to be a great partnership for both, but especially for Microsoft. And going forward, I think you got to keep an eye on this one. This is a stock that I think could be one of those in the AI space that really, really has a lot more room to the upside.
And maybe even, Pete, when you've got a big investor like Microsoft in there, tends to scare off some of the other buyers, but it might also have Microsoft deciding whether or not they want to own it. And if they want to own it, it's right now only $1.5 billion company. That's a really small bite for Microsoft. So again, I would agree with Pete. Keep your eye on this one. All right, Hims, Pete. These guys do everything from topical solutions like minoxidil or the various generic versions of that for people that are losing their hair. Do a lot of Viagra and so forth for other things that people might need. And they do the GLP drugs, Pete. And GLP-1 drugs are like Mounjaro and Ozempic, things like that. Well, when those drugs could not meet demand, the government allowed other manufacturers to basically use drugs because they were originally created for diabetes treatment, and now because so many people use them for weight loss, they couldn't keep enough of it in stock. Well, now they've ramped up significantly their production, Pete, for Lilly and Novo Nordisk, the makers of those two drugs that I described. Now they have to have I guess I'll call it generic versions have to shut down for a while, Pete. And what that means is Hims won't be able to sell at the same prices and get the market share they were getting. They're going to pay a lot more for those GLP-1 drugs. And that's why that stock, boom, 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 to the downside today.
It got hit pretty good, down about 11%. I'm going to throw out some of the positives, though, John, because when you look at this company, Hims, they are in the sweet spot. They get themselves involved in a lot of different parts of the market. And when you've got a subscriber base of, 2 million or so, I think that that says it all. And that, I think, will continue to be something that will be growing. There are a lot of shorts betting against HIMSS, of course, 12 to 13% of the short interest sitting out there, but they've got a great balance sheet. They actually do a lot of things right. I think that they've been continuing to do things right. Yes, this is a bit of a hurt to them because this was a great opportunity. They seized the opportunity, but I think with that subscriber base, they can actually get themselves into a position where they can really become a very, very big company. It's not one I'm involved in right now, but I've been there in the past, and I do think the opportunity might be there on the sell-off like this if it's overdone. I don't know that it's overdone today, but if they get a little bit crazier on it, John, I think this is a name that I'd be very interested in looking at close.
Well, I can't blame you, Pete. Well, let's talk a little bit about sports, because we like to wind up every show with Pete's take on sports. Remember, you can check him out on the Odyssey Network. He broadcasts every Sunday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on WCCO Radio, 830 up in Minneapolis. And then it goes out, boom, worldwide on the Odyssey app. So let us know what you're looking at into the weekend here, Pete.
Yeah, as we're here on Thursday, obviously, and we've got games tonight. We got games on Friday. We got games on Saturday. I saw a stat the other day, John, that said that the other day was the last day before we go for, like, I think 50 straight days or something like that of football being on television, whether it's college or pro or whatever. It's absolutely amazing this time of year, and a lot of people excited about that. But the Big Ten and the SEC, everybody talks about them all the time. What are they going to do next? What are the big two going to do next? And they've got this joint advisory group that includes the ADs, the presidents, the all sorts of different folks involved in each of these big schools that are out there, right? And it's something that I think could be very, very interesting, because the Big Ten and the SEC are truly trying to take over if they can, and they're getting closer and closer. And the latest is this partnership. And one of the things that they want is, hey, we need a guarantee that we get 8 different bids of different schools that are going to be in that big playoff, right? And that's huge, John. You got a 14-team playoff. You get 8 of them coming from the Big Ten and the SEC as a guarantee. That's going to be a very interesting partnership. Are they running for money? Absolutely. They are going for the gold, man. These guys are all going after it. There's a couple of other different strategies that folks have talked about out there, John, where you go into these mini conferences. So instead of these conferences getting bigger, you go around and you create like 12 of them with only 4 schools in there. I don't think that's going to get the traction. I think what's going to probably happen is the Big Ten and SEC, they're going to have to agree on one thing that they haven't yet, which is they're going to have 9 conference games scheduled. So not all these other games off to the sides that everybody has and extended and all that. You're going to have to basically play the majority of your conference that way. So you get a big chunk of that. So that's one of the things. The SEC hasn't gotten there yet. The Big Ten already does that. I don't think that's going to be something that's going to slow this down. But John, when I was looking at the dollars that they're talking about for, all of the football rights, but specifically even in the playoff, this is a money grab, and they are going after it in a big way. College sports are changing every single minute, and this is just another great example of that. I don't know why they even have to lock in the 8 teams, John. I would say that on average, it's always going to be 8 teams total that are going to come from those 2 conferences. But they just want to have that in ink, that has to be the way it's going to go going forward.
Yeah, that's a big bet on some of the biggest stadiums, Pete, and the biggest crowds you can draw to television as well. Mm-hmm. So as always, follow the money. Pete and I are the book before this book came out, It's Not an Option. The book before that was Follow the Smart Money. Well, smart money would be saying a Big Ten SEC combination on, again, not combining those networks yet, but combining or working schedules out so that they can see, for instance, Ohio State versus Alabama and that sort of thing, without it just being in the college football playoffs. That would be something that would draw huge ratings. So, and there are so many other matchups. You could have LSU versus Michigan and all of these kinds of games. I think, Pete, this is a great deal for the building the value of these franchises, as I'll call them, in both the Big Ten and the SEC.
Yeah. It is amazing. John, next one I wanted to throw out there to you, something that everybody can ponder over the weekend as we watch a lot of these games that are out there. But we're only 5 weeks into the college football season, and there are some shockers on either side, either much better than expected or maybe not where everybody would have expected them to be. And I'll start off like this. How about this? In the Big Ten, right now, you know who the top team is in the Big Ten right this moment? It's Indiana. They're 5-0. They've played more games in the Big Ten, so that puts them up above right now. They've got a great quarterback. They got a new coach and all the rest of that, John. So they're 5-0. UCLA is 1-3 right now. Now that's UCLA. How is UCLA not better than that? Right now, they're one of the worst teams in the Big Ten in this new conference of the Big Ten. Far more different schools than 10. But then you go to the ACC. You know who's undefeated? Duke. Duke is now 5-0, John. And so you can go through this. How about Florida State? They're 1-4. They finally got a victory last week. You got the Big 12, 5-0, BYU. What a team that nobody was talking about early in the season at all. And here they sit in the Big 12 at 5-0. Kansas, who was ranked in the top 20, they're 1-4. So there's some ups and some downs. How about the SEC? Missouri's 4-0. Now, you and I both like that team. I don't know that we thought they'd still be undefeated at this point in time going into this part of the season, but they are. And they seem to be playing very, very well, got a great quarterback. They've done everything that you'd want. Heck, last year you and I talked about this one not too long ago. They were 10-2. This is a really good program all of a sudden under the SEC. I don't expect them to win it all, John, and I don't expect them to be undefeated, but they're a heck of a football team, and they're starting off pretty nice. Mississippi State, they pretty much stink. I mean, they're the only one out there in the SEC where you go, well, wait just a minute. These guys just can't be able to get it done, and they just can't. They're losing games, and it's just a program that's really at the bottom of the SEC, and it's unfortunate for them. But what do you think about these right now? Are you shocked by some of those, and which ones? And what do you think at the end of the year? Who will be standing tall?
Well, right now, Pete, I would say that you've already tipped people off as to this fantastic running back, Ashton Genety, or Genty. Is that how you pronounce it, Pete?
Genty, yep.
At Boise State. They have a real shot. Why? Well, because they're a strong football team, and they've got the best running back since Barry Sanders. If you watch him, if you listen to players who have played against him or coaches who have coached against this kid, they have nothing but great things to say. And the comparisons, obviously he's not as big as a Bo Jackson, but he's built like a Barry Sanders, Pete.
Yep.
And all he's doing is, we're not saying he can stay on this pace, but if he stayed on the pace that he's at in these first 4 games, Pete, he'd be at 3,000 yards for the season.
Could you imagine? I mean, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, so they're definitely in the conversation for the college football playoffs. Given who they're playing in their conference, I'd say they have a real good shot at being undefeated, Pete. And when you get a player like this who has that kind of breakaway speed and, after the hit, I think, Pete, his yards after the initial contact is made, his stats would still lead the nation in rushing.
That's after contact.
That's after contact, not even counting the rest of it.
It's amazing.
Yeah, this guy just leaves people, flying out of their shoes to try to stop and then, turn back the other way and get him and so forth. So that is a team that I think you'll say, wow, Ashton might be about as good as there is. And I think a lot of people, Pete, wouldn't want to play a defense against this kid.
Well, the amazing thing about him, John, and you brought up all the different stats. The one stat that definitely stands out, I love that one about after contact. But how about he's averaging 10 yards a carry? I mean, honestly, it's one thing to do that in a game. Maybe you do it in 2 games, but so far, and now we're 4 or 5 weeks into the season, to be able to do that. The guy is absolutely impressive in every single category when you break it down, and you had a clip that broke it all down, but absolutely amazing what this kid has accomplished so far. And his physique, as you said, he looks like Barry Sanders. He really does. And I haven't said that ever before, because I think Barry Sanders was the best running back ever to play in the NFL and probably college. But to see this kid, I'm not saying he's better, but I would say that he is approaching Barry Sanders, at least as far as what he's been able to put up yards-wise, yards after contact, all of those different things. This guy is a pretty amazing kid.
Yep. And just a solid kid too, Pete, apparently. Sometimes you get guys that have all the tools, but they aren't really the sort of person that you'd like to have them be. But Boise State is not a huge school, of course, but they've put out some pretty impressive players over the past several decades now. And they've surprised a lot of really big schools, like they did with Oklahoma in that bowl game. So keep an eye on Ashton. I think also in the Heisman watch, Pete, I think he's broken into the top 3 now in Heisman betting, right up there with Hunter, with Travis Hunter. And it's going to be interesting also to see how Manning does, how Arch does down there in Texas, because obviously he's going to get a ton of coverage being the quarterback at the #1 rated team.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And that kid he's a stud in everything, Johnny. You tip your cap to what he's been able to accomplish this early in the season. And I don't expect him to slow down. I think he can keep this up. He's an amazing kid he's built so well for the game of football. It's incredible.
Well, folks, that's going to do it for the Rebels Edge this week. We would encourage you to still check out marketrebellion.com/mastermind. If you can get down to the Florida area, we're in Aventura, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week with live trading all day, Friday the 11th. So if you can make it, still a couple seats left, and we really appreciate all the support. Pete and I will be back Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great weekend, everybody.